The Jets had the 7th best playoff odds to win the Super Bowl in 2023, but are now eliminated from the playoffs after a 30-0 loss against the Miami Dolphins, now 5-9 and out of the playoffs. You would think Jets fans' expectations couldn't have been higher after getting Rodgers this offseason, but the Jets seem to always know how to crush our poor little hearts. With now this year being the 13th straight year without a playoff appearance, the Jets become the longest active streak for all major American teams to not have a playoff appearance. But as the Jets' playoff hopes come to a close, I'm going to examine why the New York Jets failed this season, looking at all overarching aspects from players and personnel to front office, and truly examine why the 2023 New York Jets are a complete failure. Aaron Rodgers came to the New York Jets after being traded from the Green Bay Packers, and not only was his journey to New York a complete saga over the offseason, the Jets traded a first-round pick and a second-round pick to acquire him, and signed him to a 3-year extension. But Rodgers' on-field play was beautiful. It was poetry, as he only played 4 snaps and tore his Achilles on 9/11 on the opening day of the New York Jets season when we were so ready to make the playoffs. True poetry in motion in Jets fashion for their quarterback that had so much expectations and was so hopeful for the season to go out in only 4 plays. But his absence on the field from the team did not just plague the Jets. What he brought along with him was even worse. Not only did he help in bringing in Allen Lazard, Nathaniel Hackett, Randall Cobb, Rodgers' Achilles comeback was completely overpowering the on-the-field struggles within the NFL media. But with only 4 snaps played, it's hard to put the blame onto him, and it's too early to say whether he'll come back to his elite level after coming back from this Achilles tear at 41, but that's a story for 2024. Nathaniel Hackett was brought in likely due to Rodgers, having 2 MVP seasons with Nathaniel Hackett as his offensive coordinator. But Nathaniel Hackett was fired from the Denver Broncos for having the worst scoring offense in the league at the time he was fired. And after coming to the Jets, he made them even worse. The Jets are currently ranked the worst offense based on DVOA, the 30th run offense and the 30th pass offense. The Jets are last in yards per game, last in total offensive yards, and have a historically low 3rd down conversion rate. Hackett has plagued the Jets offense with unimaginative play calling. The Jets seem to run inside zone on pretty much every single 1st and 10. The Jets frequently stray away from play action, and the Jets are probably last in the NFL in creative play calling. The Jets are also bottom 10 in big plays, and it seems like every play is trying to be just short of the sticks. Now, regardless whether Rodgers is influencing Nathaniel Hackett's position at offensive coordinator, he should be fired already. Even if Rodgers was on the field, it wouldn't have been better play calling anyways. Rodgers would have just hit it by making his own audibles. But why even have an offensive coordinator at that point? Just because the offensive struggles aren't just on the offensive coordinator, he is one of the main contributors to why this is the worst offense in the league. Even if Rodgers got hurt, the Jets would have had a backup plan, right? But no, the Jets decided to stick with Zach Wilson as their quarterback 2, who was benched twice in the previous season in 2022. Now, what I will say is Zach Wilson might have had more ups than he did downs this season, unlike the previous 2. You know, this season, he only finished with 1 game with 3 interceptions. He finished with 8 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. Let's go! I mean, he even outduked Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and CJ Stroud. But relative to Zach Wilson's role as, you know, a second-string quarterback, he was fine enough in times of the season, but he was nowhere near what the Jets needed to overcome their continuing struggles within the season. I mean, he really wasn't supported either. He had a terrible offensive line, lackluster play calling, a bad run game, and only 1 true wide receiver. Zach Wilson is a product of the system, not truly the cause, but he didn't make the system better either. And even when he was unceremoniously benched after a Raiders game where he blew it in the 4th quarter, the Jets don't have any other quarterback options anyways. They signed Tim Boyle, who is maybe the worst quarterback in history. And looking at pretty much all their stats combined, they combined for 6 interceptions and a passer rating of 50 without Zach Wilson and only 1 garbage time touchdown. Now, the quarterback issue is going to bother them once Rodgers leaves in most likely 2024. I only believe that Rodgers has one true year left in him. And if Rodgers retires after 2024, the Jets will be left with no heir at quarterback, with Zach Wilson already rumored to be traded this offseason. If I were to pin down one main contributor to why the offense was so bad as a whole, it would be the offensive line. The Jets had so many injuries on the offensive line, with 3 season-ending injuries. But the injuries weren't enough. The Jets' offensive line is arguably the worst combination of players I have ever seen. Looking at the Jets' starting offensive line from week 1, there's only one positive player on this list, that being Elijah Vera-Tucker, who tore his Achilles in week 5 against the Denver Broncos. We can also see that guys like Mekhi Becton lead the NFL in sacks allowed with 11. He doesn't just lead tackles, he leads the entire NFL in sacks allowed. Laken Tomlinson has 7 sacks allowed, leading all guards, and he's allowed the most pressures from any guard. No Jets offensive lineman had a PFF grade of 60 or above. The Jets had multiple guys in the 40s for PFF offensive grade. The Jets scheme really did not help the offensive line either. A lot of the schemes, like the previous mentioned inside zone on first down, likely favored one-on-ones that this terrible amalgamation of an offensive line was destined to lose. Not to mention wide receivers not getting open and Zach Wilson hitching all the time, needing them to block a lot longer than they're used to. Due to their weak line, the Jets were consistently blitzed, leading the line to consistently be outnumbered by defenders. When Jets GM Joe Douglas came into the building, he promised to revitalize that Jets offensive line back to where the late 2000s and the early 2010s Jets offensive line was, with Nick Mangold, D'Brickashaw Ferguson. But no, the line sucked the last 3 years. He has failed spectacularly at trying to rebuild this offensive line, regardless of injuries. Most of the Jets' failures in the running back room really come from the offensive line. In the NFL, you need to have a stalwart offensive line to have an extremely effective running game, and the Jets really didn't have that at any point of the season. I wouldn't put too much blame on Breece Hall. He's coming back from an ACL tear. Obviously, he's going to lose some of that burst he had in his rookie season and some of that broken tackle ability, but it seems like he just really doesn't fight through contact well either. But that Dalvin Cook signing is another albatross and will be added to the list in one of Joe Douglas's many failures in free agency. Many like myself knew that that free agency signing was not going to work out. 28 is usually the curve that running backs start to decline, and Dalvin Cook was already obviously declining, and then you put him behind a terrible offensive line. What's going to happen? He's going to run for 3.2 yards per carry with 0 touchdowns on the season. But it's truly a miracle that Breece Hall was even able to put up 1,000 all-purpose yards on this team. Thank the football gods that the Jets were able to draft Garrett Wilson, but man, do I really hate this situation for him, because he does not deserve to be on this terrible offense or terrible wide receiver core, and my biggest fear is that he's going to ask for a trade once Rodgers is gone. Outside of Garrett Wilson's 882 yards and 3 touchdowns, all other Jets wide receivers have combined for 576 yards and 2 touchdowns. How is this possible, you ask? Well, it's because our wide receiver 2 kicks a soccer ball around at practice. Allen Lazard, once again another terrible signing by GM Joe Douglas and was brought in by Aaron Rodgers, he signed a 4-year, $44 million contract this offseason to be the epitome of a 6'5 wide receiver who plays like a 5'10 wide receiver. I swear I've made more contested catches in my backyard than he did this season. He is second in the NFL in drop percentage at 17.9. He's been a healthy scratch 2 times during the season, and Robert Saleh already said he's got 1.5 years left midway through the season. Not to mention undrafted special teams player Xavier Gipson is our 3rd leading receiver with 191 yards. Randall Cobb was brought in to be the de facto wide receiver 3, but you know, he's 33 years old. And Jason Brownlee, our wide receiver 4, I guess, is a practice squad guy. With that receiver core, there's no wonder why teams bracket and they double team Garrett Wilson. It's a miracle he even has 800 plus yards. The tight ends were actually fine this year. Tyler Conklin was pretty good with 550-ish yards, second on the team, and Jeremy Rucker, second-year tight end, got a good amount of playing time this year, and he'll probably be the tight end of the future. But man, CJ Uzomah is absolutely terrible. His contract, another one free agency signing by Joe Douglas, definitely needs to go after this offseason. The defense was truly the saving grace of the New York Jets and why they aren't in contention for the #1 overall pick. The Jets have the 6th most DVOA and are the 4th ranked defense based on PFF. Not only are they the highest graded coverage team based on PFF, they also have the 3rd best pass defense DVOA. DJ Reed, Sauce Gardner, and Michael Carter II are all having great seasons with all under 90 passer rating allowed, with DJ Reed's numbers being a little inflated from that bad game against Jalen Waddle. Sauce Gardner even has an 89.8 passing coverage grade and could potentially be up for his 2nd Pro Bowl. Not to mention, the Jets were also the 6th highest graded pass rushing defense in the NFL. Even though Quentin Williams' sack numbers may be down, he's 6th in interior defensive lineman pressures with 51, and is 3rd in pressure rate at 17.9. Jermaine Johnson had a sophomore year jump with 6.5 sacks and an improved pressure rate. Bryce Huff in a contract year has 8 sacks and is currently 4th in pressure rate. Free agent signing Quentin Jefferson's even having a good year with 6 sacks. And John Franklin Myers is top 15 pressures as well. The linebackers are doing great as well. Quincy Williams is having a breakout season, as well as CJ Mosley repeating his 2022 season. A really great season from the both of them, who have been consistent the entire year. The defense was able to carry the offense pretty much the entire year. I would attribute the Jets defense for solely winning these 3 games: the Buffalo Bills game, the Philadelphia Eagles game, and the Denver Broncos game. Not only do I attribute the defense with those 2 wins, but they also held the Houston Texans to 6 points and the Giants to -9 passing yards in the other 2 wins we had this season. But most importantly, the Jets really shut down elite quarterbacks. These 6 quarterbacks had season lows against the Jets. Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts both had 3 interceptions, with Patrick Mahomes and Tua Tagovailoa having 2, with Justin Herbert and CJ Stroud being completely shut down by the Jets defense. But even with those stats against those quarterbacks, they were 3-3 in those games. Without those great performances, the Jets would likely be in contention with the 2-12 Panthers for the #1 overall pick or #2 overall pick. Defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich will likely be up for head coaching candidacy in 2024, so we'll have to see a different defensive play caller potentially next year. The unlikely hero for the Jets so far has been the special teams. Thomas Morstead has gave the Jets the most punting yards in the NFL with 4,004. He's 3rd in the NFL in punts inside of the 20 with 32, and is the 4th highest graded punter based on PFF. The same thing can be said about Greg Zuerlein, who was 5th in PFF field goal rating. He's only missed 1 field goal, 27 for 28. He's made 4 out of 5 of his 50-yard field goals, with his longest being 55 yards. Even Xavier Gibson returned that punt return touchdown to win against the Buffalo Bills in overtime in Week 1. Metlife Stadium, the graveyard that it is, always seems to injure players surrounding it. Can that be attributed to the cold weather, the always rainy conditions, or maybe the turf monster? By the way, that turf monster has caused 50 players to go down with lower extremity injuries over the last 3 years, 15 being season-ending. Robert Saleh's seat could not be hotter, and honestly, he should be in contention to be fired over this offseason. Robert Saleh's issues stem not only on the field, but off the field as well. Under Robert Saleh, the Jets seem to have horrible clock management, bad use of timeouts, and discipline has always seemed to be an issue since day 1 in 2021. In 2023, the Jets are 2nd in penalties. But not only that, it seems that Robert Saleh has completely lost the locker room. His moves at quarterback seem to make no sense, consistently benching Zach Wilson and then bringing him back to start, and his 16 wins to 32 losses with 17 defeats coming by double digits isn't helping his case either. Even if the Rodgers' move was a good idea at the time, Joe Douglas is not helping the Jets, or has not helped the Jets, to build a competitive roster in general. I can look at this in 2 ways: his big free agency signings and his drafting outside of 2022. Outside of Laken Tomlinson, every single one of these players plays less than 50% of the snaps. And outside of DJ Reed and Tyler Conklin, these are the rest of the biggest moves he's made in free agency in Joe Douglas' time at GM. We'll get the unfortunate ones out of the way, like Corey Davis and Carl Lawson. Carl Lawson tore his Achilles and lost all of his burst, and Corey Davis retired in training camp this offseason. But then we could look at McCall Hardman, who had 6 snaps per game and was cut. He signed Dalvin Cook and Allen Lazard over this offseason, who are both probably the worst or one of the worst qualified in each of their positions. You have Laken Tomlinson, who is probably the worst qualified guard in the league. Dwayne Brown, who has a 47 PFF grade and ended his season in injury. And CJ Uzomah, whose penalties have brought back 3 touchdowns. Some of Joe Douglas's little moves in free agency have kind of worked out, like Quentin Jefferson for 1 year and signing Bryce Huff in free agency. But outside of 2022, and it's too early to talk about 2023, his draft history is not very good. There are only 3 players from the 2020 draft class that are even still on the roster, and Mekhi Becton and Bryce Hall are probably not going to be re-signed. I think Ashton Davis will stay though. And there are only 5 players from the 2021 draft class that are still on the team. Hamza Nasir-Al-Din is not. And Zach Wilson will likely be traded in the offseason, making that list down to 4. The 2021 draft class really saved Joe Douglas's career as a drafter. Sauce Gardner, Jermaine Johnson, Breece Hall, and Garrett Wilson are all from that class and all thriving on a very terrible team. But even looking at the 2023 draft class, it seemed like 2022 was a fluke. The real only main contributor from the 2023 class has been Joe Tippmann, and he's been pretty okay on a really bad offensive line and will likely be the center of the future. The Jets went out with a whimper, losing 30-0 to be eliminated from the playoffs, yet another year of disappointment. Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas might be fired after this offseason, but knowing the Jets, they'll likely give them 1 more year to prove that they could win with Aaron Rodgers. But if they can't, the Jets will once again clean house, and the cycle of rebuilding just to tear it down will continue. It's uncertain whether the Jets can succeed next year, even with a good offseason and even with Rodgers returning to elite level, with the pure strength of the AFC and the Jets' luck with injuries. But if the Jets can manage to have a successful offseason and Rodgers comes back to a late level, maybe next year will be the year that we finally break our playoff streak. But I can't believe I thought this year was going to be our year. Hey, if you like this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel and make sure you like the video and share with your friends. This video took around 15 hours to totally produce, and this is probably my most edited video yet. So again, if you like this video, make sure you leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.